Hey everyone, this is Carbonite, and today I am bringing you a tech profile of one of the, I think, 5 archetypes that were introduced in our collaboration set with Token Rambu a couple months ago. Actually, I think it might have been a year by now. But anyways, I thought it'd be funny to show you what one of the Token Rambu decks looks like. This is probably not the optimal build, but this is just what I've been playing around with. And I mean, pretty much all Token Rambu decks are pretty terrible. So let's get into it. Alright, so starting off with the Ride deck, of course I am going to have to explain every single card in this deck because there is a 0% probability that anyone watching this knows what these cards do. So basically we have the Grade 0, which is actually just a generic D starter. And then we have the Grade 1, by the way, this guy's name is Hachisuka Kotetsu. So the Grade 1 skill is that on Vanguard, act once per turn, you can Soul Blast one, so Soul Blast your starter, and you actually have to reveal 2 cards with Hachisuka Kotetsu from your Ride deck, so kind of like a Greed On thing. And then you choose a card from your drop, and you put it in your hand. So if you are playing the full Ride line, which all the Token Rambu decks kind of force you to play their respective Ride lines. If you play his Ride line, you basically don't discard for Ride deck, which is kind of weird. You just like discard something and you add it back, which is, I'm just gonna say, not good because you're giving your opponent extra information. They know what card in your hand. Of course, you could always just discard it during your next turn, so it's not too bad. It does have this other skill where it gets 2k during your turn, but that doesn't matter because you're not going to be playing any Token Rambu Ride deck cards outside of the Ride deck because they're all designed like that and they're all terrible. The Grade 2 has a skill that when it rides on top of the Grade 1, you counterblast 1 and you search your card for a Urashima Kotetsu. You call it to rear and shuffle your deck. So you're probably wondering what the heck that card is. That card is actually this. It is a Grade 1, and its only skill that is that if it has something in the same column as stuff, it gets 5k, so it's a 10k booster or a 10k attacker, whichever you need it. I usually call this behind the Vanguard, just because 10k boost is pretty good, and I do need my other rear columns to do the funny stuff that this deck does. And then of course we have the main card, the Grade 3. He has one skill, which is what the whole deck is built around. It's continuous during both players' turn. If you have 5 rear guards, so if you have a full board, all your front row rear guards get 5k, and all your back row rear guards get boost. So that means that you can be boosting with Grade 2s and Grade 3s. Which is basically what this deck does. This deck just builds a board, you swing 3 times, and hope you win. Which is not a great game plan. Alright, so moving on to the main deck, we are actually playing, of course, the 3 other copies of Persona Ride. This is what the normal art looks like. It's alright, but obviously you need Persona Ride. You're a tier F deck, so you need all the help that you can get. Right, so moving on, that is actually the only Grade 3 we are playing in the deck. Everything else in the deck is actually Grade 2, other than Urashima. So let's just go over the Grade 2s. So first off, we do have the 4 copies of Mikazuki Munchika. This is the main triple rare. This is the only expensive card in the set at all. I think it's the only expensive base rare. I think it's like $5 or something. But this card appeared in G a lot, and now he's back in D. And we obviously have to go over his effect because nobody knows what these cards do. So this is a once per turn. When it attacks, you perform all the effects according to the number of cards in your damage zone. So he's a limit break card. So if you're at limit break 3, he gets 5k until the end of turn. Unfortunately, that's a once per turn, so it does not stack. 4 or more, you look at the top card of your deck and you put it on the top or the bottom. That's okay, I guess. And then if you're at 5, limit break 5, you can counterblast 1, soul blast 1, and stand this unit. And do note that all of those skills are once per turn. So you swing with this 15 it gets the 5k, you check the top card, put it on top or bottom, and then you counterblast Soul Blast 1, stand it, and then you swing, and it is still 15, and you get none of those skills again. So believe it or not, this is probably the best token round boot card there is. Not even just generically, but like in general. So if this is the best you're working with, you can kind of guess the power level of the deck on pretty much every single deck. But yeah, if you see this card, you're happy. If you don't really care because you're still playing not great. Alright, so moving on to another pretty decent card in this deck. We have, what's this guy's name? Nagasone Kotetsu. So he has one skill. If you have another card with Kotetsu in its card name, this unit gets 5k. Now that is a con, so it's during both players' turns. So this card is he's actually a 9k base, so he is at 14 on both players' turns. And with the extra boost from your Vanguard, he gets an extra 5k if he's in the front row. So he is a 14k booster or a 19k attacker, which is really the best that this deck can do. So that's why we're playing it. And just to remind you, the Vanguard's name is Kotetsu, so this card will be always live. You don't need another copy of him. Alright, so next up we do have, I'm going to talk about these two grade 2s together, because this is your board building combo. So you have this guy, which is Minamoto Kyomaru, 2 copies of him, and 2 copies of his partner, Suishinshi Masahide. So these cards basically have the same effect. They are grade 2s, 10Ks. Their skill is that when your Vanguard is placed, if I can get this to focus, when your Vanguard is placed, you counterblast 1 and you search your deck for the other copy, call it to an open rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So I play 4 copies of this card, because you do want to see it. If you're really worried about building a board, you can do 3-3 or 3-2. But for the most part, you just need to draw into either one of these in your opening hand. You do kind of hard mull for this. So you would want to get this, you call it out probably to the back row, because you want to make sure it can't get attacked into, and then you call it when you're on grade 2, and then you ride deck into your grade 3, and then you would proc this skill or this skill, counterblast 1, and call the other one out. So this basically just builds a board, because this deck is centered around just having a full board the whole time. So these guys usually end up being your 10k boosters, which is not great, but you do need 5 rear guards to actually activate that skill. So yeah. Alright, so next up we do have another grade 2, which is Kogisunumaru. So it's 2 copies of this guy. This is an interesting card. I didn't say good, but interesting. But it's a 13k body on a grade 2, and its only skill is a restraint, where if this card's power is 13 or less, it cannot attack. So this card, if it's just on the board with no effects, it can't swing or anything. But since your whole deck is centered around boosting and giving 5k, this card will always be live. If you put it in the front row when you have a full board, it becomes 18k and it can swing. Alternatively, if you can just put it in the back row and it'll be a 13k booster, which, given the fact that all your units are grade 2 in this deck, makes a good magic number. Alright, so next up we have a card that is almost good. 4 copies of this guy, Kuwanago. This is actually a card I think a lot of clans wish they had, but it is an on. When its attack hits a Vanguard, you can either counter charge 1 or soul charge 2. So this is basically like a Bellicosity Dragon, which kind of gives you a little bit of hint of how much this card is just so far behind where we are in Vanguard right now. But you do actually blast through a lot of counterblasts with this deck. You counterblast 1 for the ride deck. You want to be counterblasting 1 for these guys. And although you don't need counterblast at all for like your Vanguard skill, the more counterblast you have, the more pressure you have, because you do need to be able to pressure and do something. And it is on hit pressure, which is really nice. Something that the deck won't have. And he is always going to be, your columns are usually swinging for 25, so they either give you a 15k or they let you hit and get the counter charge. So I think it's pretty necessary for the deck. Alright, so next up we have another 2 of a Shokudai, what's this guy's name? Shokudai Kiri Mitsutada. 2 copies. So this guy, his skill is if he's placed from hand and your opponent's Vanguard is great through a graveyard, you counterblast 1 and give all your front row units an extra 5k. So since you are just, all your columns are hitting for 25 most of the time, giving them extra 5k to make it 30 is pretty good, and it does include the Vanguard, so makes a nice matching number with the Vanguard, giving it 28, so that's pretty good. And his other skill is that if it hits a Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1 and retire one of your opponent's front row rear guards. That skill is much better in another deck. I'm mostly playing this card just for the extra 5k, because you do need extra power in the deck. Alright, and so for actually the last grade 2, it is going to be 2 copies of this guy. His name is Dodanuki Masakuni. And this guy is a act once per turn. If your opponent's Vanguard is great through a graveyard, you CB1 and it gets 10k. So this is mostly just to like hit numbers. The CB does cost a little bit, is a little bit hefty. So it's just a 20k body for 1 counterblast, either a 20k booster or a 25k attacker. You do really need ways to pump yourself up. So this card shares a lot of similarities with the last one we talked about, whereas this gives 15k to your 15k spread around. This gets 10k in 1 unit or in 1 column. So you can, if you're playing this deck, you can definitely tinker around with these numbers. You could go 4 or 4. Whichever you think was necessary. For right now, I'm just playing with these ones. I don't play this deck too often, but this is fine for the time being. Right, so going over the grade 1s, Urashima is your only grade 1, and you're searching it off Ride deck. Just hope you don't draw it with your opening hand. Alright, and so actually finishing up the grade 1s, you probably saw this coming. Token Rambu does actually have D perfect guards, which is almost surprising considering how bad all the decks are, but you know, perfect guards are super necessary in this deck. Honestly, you could give Token Rambu like 5 perfect guards or 6 perfect guards and they'd still be terrible. But yeah, just perfect guards. Alright, so starting off with the trigger lineup, we are obviously just playing the 8 crit that we can, because you need to be able to kill your opponent, and if you do not kill them, you are dying, which is most of the time, unless you're playing against either another Token Rambu deck or another Records of Ragnarok deck. So yeah, 8 crit because you definitely need it. And for our 3 trigger, we are playing 3 draw. Really sucks. Obviously, Token Rambu doesn't have any effect triggers. So you are just playing with 5k shields. You could also play fronts in the deck, because you usually do swing van first. But I'm playing draws right now because you need to be able to build a board, and draws just help you get those pieces. Okay, and last up, we are obviously playing the 4 heals. We're playing vanilla heals just because that's all Token Rambu has. I'm playing the little one from the trial deck or starter deck just because there's a little tiger on our head, so that makes it infinitely superior to the other heal trigger from the booster set. Alright, and so the last card that we actually do have to go over is the Token Rambu OT, because this card is completely unique and unlike any other token, any other overtrigger in the game. So you might notice this card actually has no shield value. Most OTs have 50k shield value. So you can only have 1 OT in a deck. When it's revealed as a trigger, you remove that card, draw a card, choose one of your units, gets 100 mil. And then if you reveal this as a drive check, you activate this additional effect. The additional effect is that all your units get +1 critical, which is super funny whenever it goes off, because if you swing Van first, you give all your units a critical. which is insanely funny. But this card does get removed after you check it. Funnily enough, Token Rambu does have a card where if your OT gets checked, you actually get to add it to your hand instead of like putting it in the banish pile. But yeah, this card is actually a trigger order card, the only one of its kind. So if you draw into this, you can't use it as a shield value. You have to play it as an order, which is fine because Token Rambu doesn't have any other orders, so it doesn't conflict with anything. Anyways, the order effect is that you choose one of your vanguards, your vanguard gets a critical, and then if your damage zone has 5 or more cards, all of your units get plus 10k, so including the vanguard. So I've never actually resolved that effect. It is very slow. This is honestly just like a dead card until you get to 5. But honestly, playing this deck, you probably will be at 5 a lot of the time. So maybe it comes up sometimes. But honestly, the checking it offensively usually does a lot more, puts in a lot more effort. And there are actually OTs for every single archetype in the deck, and they are available in multiple rarities. This one is just the common printing. But yeah. Alright, that's going to be it for the deck profile. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe you had a laugh, or maybe you're one of the 3 people who's actually interested in playing Token Rambu. But either way, I'll see you guys in the next one.